All right, so today we're going to be doing something a little bit different.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, it should be fun, I think. Um, we are going to be diving into the world of witchy decor.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether you consider yourself, a practicing witch or you just like the aesthetic,
Right.
this is all about creating a really intentional and personalized space,
Yeah.
that reflects a kind of magical energy.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we have this awesome DIY guide that we're going to be kind of jumping into today.
Cool.
And it's full of all sorts of ideas, like from making your own altar to,
Yeah.
bringing in elements of, nature.
Right.
I'm super excited because you know me, I love a good DIY project,
Of course.
especially if it involves a little magic.
Exactly.
So yeah, one of the things that I thought was really cool about this guide is that it really emphasizes like a very personal approach.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what's really interesting about this guide is it's not like here are the 5 rules you have to follow to have like a witchy space. It's more about kind of the principles behind it and then how you can kind of adapt those to fit your own, personal style.
Exactly. It's really about making your space an extension of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a place where you feel empowered and connected to your own sense of magic.
Absolutely.
So they start off by encouraging us to kind of define our witchy aesthetic.
Right.
And they list a bunch of different options, like everything from dark and Gothic and nature-based to celestial eclectic and modern, even cottagecore and vintage.
Yeah, there are so many to choose from.
I know. And I have to admit, when I saw cottagecore, I was like, ooh,
Yeah.
my bookshelves lined with vintage spell books
Right.
and maybe a few like strategically placed crystals.
A little bit of moss.
Ooh, yeah, some moss. I love it. What about you? Is there any particular aesthetic that kind of speaks to you?
I think they're all super interesting, but I find myself drawn to the celestial
Yeah.
aesthetic. There's something about like star charts and moon phases and like those deep kind of calming colors that I
Yeah.
just find very appealing, and I think it evokes a real sense of wonder
Totally.
and connection to like the cosmos. So it's
Mhm.
like bringing the vastness of the universe right into your living room.
I love that. And I think it's interesting how these different aesthetics can almost reflect like different personalities,
Oh, it's
right?
for sure.
And different intentions.
Yeah.
Like, someone who's really drawn to that dark and Gothic style
Mm.
might be seeking like a space that feels mysterious and introspective,
Right.
while someone who loves, cottagecore might be looking to create something really cozy and whimsical.
Yeah,
It's almost like a form of self-expression, right?
definitely. I think it's about creating an environment that resonates with your inner world.
Hmm.
So a place where you feel comfortable, exploring your magical practice
Yeah,
or just connecting with your intuition.
exactly. And speaking of kind of creating a focal point for your space, the guide goes on to discuss DIY altars,
Yes.
which I love.
It's a good one.
I love it. And they emphasize that you don't need to have, a fancy setup or anything. It's more about the intention and the objects that you choose to include.
Right. Like it doesn't have to be, a big production.
Right.
It can be something really simple and small.
Exactly. And I've seen some really incredible altars that people have made out of like, you know, upcycled furniture or vintage suitcases,
Oh.
or even just a simple wooden box that's adorned with like meaningful objects.
Right.
But there's one detail that really caught my eye that I wanted to mention.
Okay.
They talk about placing a mirror beneath the altar items to amplify the energy.
Interesting.
Not only does that sound visually stunning to me,
Yeah.
but it also kind of taps into the practice of scrying,
Right.
which involves using reflective surfaces for divination and like connecting with other realms.
Yeah. Scrying is a fascinating practice.
It is.
It has such a rich history.
It does.
And it's based on the idea that these reflective surfaces can act as portals to the subconscious mind and even to other dimensions.
Wow.
So by gazing into a, mirror or crystal ball or even like a bowl of water,
Wow.
practitioners seek to gain insights, receive messages, or even connect with spirits.
That's incredible.
It's really a way of deepening your intuition and expanding your awareness beyond just like the physical realm.
That is so cool. It's amazing how something as simple as a mirror
Right.
can hold so much like symbolic and magical potential.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the energy that we imbue into objects and spaces, right?
It does, and it highlights the fact that magic isn't just about, spells and rituals.
Right.
It's about intentionality.
Hmm.
It's about symbolism,
Yeah.
and it's about the subtle ways that we interact with our environment.
I love that. Okay, so moving on from our mystical mirror moment,
Okay.
let's talk about sprucing up those
All
walls.
right.
So the guide suggests all these different DIY wall decor ideas, like everything from moon phase garlands and hanging crystals to pressed herb
I
frames
know.
and witchy shadow boxes.
Mhm.
I know, right? But what really stood out to me was the idea of using old book pages or grimoires as wall art.
Oh, yeah. There's just something about old books,
I know.
especially ones that have like a magical or mystical theme.
Yes.
The aged paper, the faded ink. Sometimes there are handwritten notes in the margins.
Yeah.
It's just like holding a piece of history in your hands,
Oh, really?
a connection to past practitioners and their accumulated wisdom.
Exactly. And imagine framing those pages and hanging them on your wall.
Right.
Not only would it look visually stunning,
Yeah.
but I feel like it would also add this layer of mystique and historical depth to your space.
Hmm.
It's like each page holds like a secret waiting to be unlocked.
And if we think about the symbolism of that too,
Yeah.
old books represent knowledge learning,
Yes.
the transmission of like esoteric traditions.
Right.
So by incorporating them into your decor, you're not just creating this visual statement, you're inviting those energies into your space.
I love that. It's like a subtle reminder to keep learning, keep exploring, and keep connecting with like the lineage of magical practitioners who came before us.
Absolutely.
And speaking of setting the mood, let's talk about lighting.
Ooh, yes.
Because the guide emphasizes how lighting can really transform the atmosphere of a space, right?
Sure.
Creating a sense of sacredness and ritual.
Yeah, lighting is so crucial for setting the right ambiance, especially when it comes to, magical practice.
Right.
So think about how different types of light kind of evoke different feelings.
Right.
So soft flickering candlelight can create a sense of intimacy and introspection, which is perfect for meditation or divination, whereas bright natural sunlight might be more suitable for spell work.
Right.
Or rituals that require like a boost of energy.
Totally. That's a great point. And that reminds me of one of the coolest ideas I saw in the guide.
Okay, what is it?
They call them floating spell candles.
Ooh, that sounds neat.
I know they describe these like tea lights that are gently bobbing in moon-charged water,
Okay.
surrounded by flower petals.
That's beautiful.
Can you just picture that?
That sounds so serene
I know.
and visually stunning.
It's like creating a miniature luminescent altar
Yes.
right on your tabletop.
And, by using that moon-charged water,
Yes.
you're further imbuing the candles with that lunar energy,
Right.
which is often associated with intuition, dreams, and the feminine principle.
Okay, I'm completely sold.
Yeah.
I'm adding floating spell candles to my to-do list right now.
Good idea.
And while we're on the topic of kind of creating a balanced and harmonious space, let's talk about incorporating the four elements.
Yes.
Earth, air, fire, and water.
Love it. The concept of the four elements is central to so many magical traditions.
It is.
It's about recognizing the fundamental forces that shape our world.
Right.
And inviting those energies into our lives and our spaces. And by achieving that balance between the elements, we create a sense of harmony and wholeness. So how would we go about incorporating these elements into our witchy decor? Well, for earth, we could use like plants, crystals, maybe even a small bowl of soil or sand.
Yeah.
For air, we could hang, feathers or wind chimes, or even just open a window to let the breeze flow through.
Right.
Fire is represented by candles, of course. But you could also incorporate other fiery elements like incense.
Right.
Or a fireplace if you have one.
Oh, yeah.
And for water, you could use a small fountain,
Oh,
a bowl of moon-charged water, or even just a collection of seashells or sea glass.
Beautiful. I love that. It's amazing how many like everyday objects
Oh, no.
can be used to represent these elemental forces.
It is.
And it really emphasizes that connection between magic and the natural world.
Yeah.
Which feels so important, especially in like our modern technology-driven lives.
It really does. It's about recognizing that inherent magic and power within nature and inviting those energies into our homes and into our hearts.
All right, so before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I want to touch on two more elements of witchy decor.
Okay.
DIY spell jars.
Yes.
And those charming, like, vintage and mystical accents.
Love it.
So tell me about spell jars. What
Yeah.
are those all about?
So spell jars are very cool.
Okay.
They're essentially vessels for intention.
Ooh.
So they're filled with herbs, crystals, and other ingredients that correspond to specific desires.
Interesting.
So, you might create a spell jar for protection, for abundance, for love, for healing.
Wow.
The possibilities really are endless.
That's incredible. And what I love about spell jars is that they're so personalized.
Right.
You can choose ingredients that resonate with you and your intentions and create like a unique blend that's imbued with your own energy.
Yeah, it's like a mini ritual in a jar.
I love that.
It's very cool.
And then we have those just delightful vintage and mystical accents
Yeah.
that just add a touch of whimsy and visual intrigue.
Like antique mirrors,
Yeah.
handmade scrolls, maybe some DIY potion bottles
I love it.
filled with colorful liquids and herbs.
I can picture like a shelf adorned with all of those items.
Yeah.
It would be like a miniature curiosity cabinet filled with magical treasures.
Right, and it's those little details that really make a space feel special.
Yes.
And personalized.
They do.
It's about creating a space that speaks to your soul. A
Yes.
sanctuary where you can connect with your inner witch and explore those mysteries of the unseen world.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So we've covered
We've covered a lot.
a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably a good time to take a little break, and we'll come back and kind of recap all the things that we've talked about so far
Sounds good.
and maybe dive into a few more.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Me too.
All right, let's take a break.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dive back into the world of witchy decor.
Yes.
Before we get too carried away with, our own decorating plans,
Yeah.
let's take a minute to kind of recap what we've talked about so far for our listeners.
Okay, sounds good.
So I guess like as a starting point, where would you begin? Like, what are some of the key takeaways?
Well, I think one of the first things that we talked about that's super important is defining that personal witchy aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really just, figuring out what kind of vibe you want to create in your space.
Right.
Whether you're drawn to like the drama of the dark and Gothic aesthetic or the cozy charm of cottagecore,
Yeah,
there really is like a style out there for everyone.
totally. And, you don't even have to stick with just one.
Right.
You can mix and match elements,
Absolutely.
right, to create something that's truly unique.
Yeah.
Like maybe you love the idea of a celestial themed altar, but you also want to bring in some, nature-based elements like plants and crystals.
Right.
It's really all about what feels right for you.
Exactly.
Follow your intuition.
Yes. And then we talked about DIY altars.
Yes, those
Gosh.
sacred spaces.
Yeah.
Where you can perform rituals or meditate or just connect with your intuition.
Exactly. And again, you don't need a fancy setup.
Right. You can use an upcycled piece of furniture,
Right.
a vintage tray, or even just a simple shelf that you adorn with meaningful objects.
It's about the energy you bring to the space
Yeah.
and the intention you imbue into those objects.
Exactly. And then we kind of went off on this really fascinating tangent about scrying,
We did.
which was so cool.
Scrying is very cool.
It is. So for anyone who missed it, it's essentially using a reflective surface like a mirror to enhance your intuition and connect with other realms.
Yes, it's a technique that has been used for centuries
Wow.
by, mystics and seers
Really?
to gain insights and receive messages from the unseen world.
It's amazing to think about the history.
It is.
Like the mystery behind something as simple as a mirror.
Right. It's like we look in mirrors every day.
We do.
But we don't always think about their magical potential.
Right. It really highlights that magic is kind of all around us.
It is.
Even in those like most mundane objects, if we know how to see it.
Absolutely.
And then we moved on to wall decor,
Yeah.
where we talked about all sorts of creative DIY ideas.
Where like moon phase garlands and crystal grids.
Yes. Oh, and those old book pages
Yeah.
that I love so much. I
Love that idea.
It's like instant history and wisdom.
It is, and it looks so cool.
It does. Okay. And then, of course, we can't forget about lighting.
Yes. Lighting is key.
It is. We talked about how different types of light create different moods and enhance different magical practices.
Right. Soft candlelight for meditation.
Yes.
Bright sunlight for spell work. It's all about setting that ambiance.
And those floating spell candles.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Still thinking about those.
I know, they just sound so magical.
They do. I just love that imagery
Yeah.
of those tea lights like bobbing in the moon-charged water.
It's beautiful.
It is. And then we also talked about the 4 elements,
Yes.
right? Earth, air, fire, and water.
It's all about balance.
Yes, incorporating those into your decor.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about plants and crystals and natural materials for earth.
Yeah.
Others, wind chimes,
Yeah.
fresh air for air,
Exactly.
candles, incense for fire, and then fountains and moon water and seashells for water.
It's so cool how those elemental forces can be represented in so many different ways.
It is.
And
Yeah.
it's a reminder that, we're constantly surrounded by those energies
Yes, we are.
and interconnected with them.
We are. And then, of course, we explored the world of DIY spell jars,
Yes.
those personalized vessels of intention.
I love them.
I do too.
They're such a great way to like manifest your desires, whether it's protection, abundance, love, healing, really anything.
Anything your heart desires.
Exactly.
And we finished up talking about those whimsical vintage and mystical accents.
Yes, love those little details.
They really do add so much.
They do.
I think it's those little touches that really personalize a space.
Absolutely. It's about, creating an environment that feels truly authentic to you.
It is. So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to remember that it's not about following any rules or trying to replicate someone else's style.
Yes.
It's about connecting with your own intuition, discovering what resonates with you, and creating a space that feels authentically you.
I couldn't agree more. It's about finding your own unique expression of magic.
Yes.
And letting it shine through in your surroundings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like we're kind of giving ourselves permission to like step into our own power.
Right.
And create a space that really reflects who we are.
Exactly. It's about embracing the idea that like magic isn't something that's separate from us. It's something that resides within each of us.
Yes.
And can be expressed, in countless ways.
I love that. Okay, so before we officially wrap up this deep dive and send our listeners off on their witchy decorating adventures,
Okay.
I have one final thought-provoking question.
Okay. Hit me.
So we've talked a lot about like, the traditional elements of witchy decor.
Right.
Like crystals and herbs and vintage finds and all that.
Yeah.
But what about incorporating something modern
Ooh.
into a witchy space?
That's a good question.
Right? Like how do we bridge that gap between ancient practices and our modern, like technology-driven world?
Right, because some people might say that technology is a distraction from, true magical practice.
Right. But could it also be used to like enhance the magic?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Right.
I like that.
Look, I'm just picturing things like digital altar cloths
Okay.
with like glowing sigils on them,
Ooh.
or like a meditation app
Right.
that plays nature sounds and binaural beats.
Yeah. And like instead of having, actual physical candles, maybe you have like a digital fireplace.
Yes.
Or a projector that casts images of like flickering flames onto your wall.
I love that.
So you get that same ambiance,
You do.
but without the fire hazard.
Exactly. What about using a smart speaker
Ooh, interesting.
to play specific frequencies or soundtracks that are designed to enhance certain rituals or spells?
I love that it's like taking these ancient practices and giving them a modern twist.
Exactly. And it's so fascinating to think about how magic might continue to evolve as technology keeps advancing.
Totally. Like, who knows? Maybe someday we'll be having virtual reality rituals
Wow.
or augmented reality apps that overlay magical symbols onto our surroundings.
It's mind-blowing.
It is.
And it really makes us think outside the box and expand our definition of what magic can even be.
Definitely.
So to our listeners out there, I encourage you to embrace both the ancient and the modern as you create your own witchy space.
Yes, don't be afraid to experiment, to blend tradition with innovation.
Yes.
And to find what truly speaks to your soul.
Exactly. Whether you're drawn to that classic imagery of candles and crystals, or you're excited to explore the potential of technology in your magical practice. Just remember that the most important thing is to create a space that feels authentically you.
Absolutely. Fill it with objects that inspire you, surround yourself with beauty, and let your intuition be your guide.
Yes, the magic is waiting to be discovered.
It is. And remember, there's a whole community out there of like-minded individuals sharing their ideas and inspiration.
Yes, connect with each other, learn from each other, and celebrate all those unique ways that we express our magic.
Exactly.
So happy decorating, everyone.
Happy decorating.